Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 6 of What If Deku Had Green Lightning. If you guys enjoyed this what if and want to see part 7 of it, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Iida looked on in distress as his green-haired friend had shifted to a more offensive stance. Iida, can you move yet? Izuku asked, his eyes wary of the blades the hero killer had brought out. Not yet, but please reconsider, Izuku. This isn't safe. Iida replied, emotion dripping into his voice. It's definitely not safe, there's no changing that. But that's the whole point of being a hero. We're here to be not safe, so we can make sure others are, and putting ourselves in danger to save others. Izuku replied, tightening his fists. Hey kid. Iida heard a voice on the other end of the earpiece, and listened intently. So far I've only been able to send one other person your way, Endeavor's kid, as we all have our hands full with these Nomu sons of Bit, but hopefully they can help you kids hold out until we're done here. Iida relayed the information to Izuku, who only gave a stiff nod as he shifted his body to avoid more blades, all three moving like nothing more than silver and green blurs respectively. This time, however, Iida watched in terror as Izuku braced himself in a combat stance, and as soon as Stain prepared to swing, Izuku bounced to the side of one of the adjacent buildings to dodge. Then, using the building as a springboard, bounce off and grab Stain by his shoulders, and swing him into a large metal skip, the impact resulting in a dent, and a brief flash of the green lightning going through Stain. Ha, you're pretty good kid, but not good enough, Stain said, causing Izuku to look around in a panic. Above you. This caused Izuku to look up just as the blade Stain threw once Izuku dodged it to make a glancing blow on his cheek, resulting in a small amount of blood to come out. Whilst Izuku was looking up, Stain managed to lick his blood, and Izuku ended up collapsing to the ground. There was a small stream of tears running down Iida's cheek as he watched Stain take a position above Izuku, a blade in hand. Sorry about this kid. I ain't gonna kill you, but I'm gonna have to put you out of commission for the time being. Stain suddenly froze, a steady stream of green lightning running through him. Izuku wa. I might not be able to move most muscles, but I can still direct my quirk. Izuku replied, gritting his teeth as his hands steadily became more and more numb. Iida could see the sparks running off the ground, signifying the current of green lightning running through it. But when Mr. Ozawa. That's because I'm using it differently at the moment. I'll explain later, let me know the moment Todoroki area. Izuku cut Iida off. I'm here. Todoroki proceeded to cut Izuku off, launching a stream of fire at Stain. In response, Stain forced himself to jump despite the lightning, breaking the current and avoiding the fire. Haha damn brats. Stain said, reaching for more weapons, to no avail. What? You green-haired brat. I'm going to tear you Lee. You will do no such thing. Todoroki cut Stain off, launching a glacier of ice separating Izuku from Stain. In the process, Izuku made sure to destroy the blade that had cut his cheek as he watched Todoroki run towards him, carrying the paralyzed boy back to where Iida and Native were. He doesn't have any easily accessible blades anymore, so hopefully he'll have some difficulty getting through the ice, and he should still be in some after effects from my quirk. Todoroki nodded, and turned to face Stain, who had kicked his way through the ice. Ha son of Endeavor, oh I'm going to have fun ridding the world of you and your father. Stain said. Todoroki tensed up, and sent a powerful stream of fire towards Stain, who jumped to the side. You're not fast, or as smart as the other brat, but your raw power is far greater, this shouldn't be too hard. Stain told him. Todoroki. Take Izuku and run. Don't get mixed up in this. Iida yelled, desperate to limit the damage of his own failures. You shouldn't have to clean up my own shortcomings as a hero. Iida. Todoroki called back, launching a glacier of Stain. We are heroes. This is what we're going to do. So stand up, and fight. If you're so worried about your hero's shortcomings, help us clean up then. I don't deserve to be called a hero, I have strayed far from the path of heroism. Iida replied, tears running down his face. Yes you do Iida. Don't let Stain get to you. There are many ways to be a hero, and sometimes we go the wrong way, but focus on your goal. Why did you want to be a hero Iida? Izuku yelled, green lightning pulsing through him as he waited for the moment he could send another zap through the hero killer. Why do I want to be a hero? Iida whispered to himself. He watched as Todoroki did his best to fend off the hero killer, launching 2 streams of ice to narrow down their movement. He's cool and collected, even in a situation like this, making decisions like a leader. Like the leader Tensei was. That's right. I wanted to be a hero that would be respected, and lead as a prime example for others. Iida thought, tightening his fists. Realizing he could move again, he stood up and rushed the hero killer with a powerful kick, countering their kick towards Todoroki. I apologize for my actions that led us into this mess, but will do my best to right them. Iida said, clenching his fist. Todoroki nodded in response, as the hero killer rushed the 2 students again, with a kick aimed at Iida. You may have had a change of heart now, but that won't be good enough. Stain yelled, baring his teeth at the students. Iida watched in terror as he changed target and launched over the two UA students towards Native and Izuku. Faster than he could blink, however, Izuku had intercepted Stain and threw him back in front of the other two UA students, resulting in Stain being kicked further back by Iida before needing to dodge a stream of fire from Todoroki. "You free already?" Iida asked, eyes glued on the hero killer, currently jumping between the two buildings. "I'm assuming there's some other variable, like quantity or blood type. We need to finish this quickly though, both you and I are injured, and we're all running out of energy." When Izuku mentioned this, Iida realized that Izuku wasn't moving anywhere near the speed he was earlier, and the usual sparks had died down. Izuku's hair still stood on end, however, a vibrant green that was somehow managing to illuminate the immediate vicinity. "Right, let's finish this. I'll bring him over, you need to hit him with everything you've got," Izuku said, before bouncing between the buildings to match the hero killer's movements and predict their next move. "I'm sorry I let you down, both of you, and Tensei," Iida thought as he braced himself to kick the hero killer the moment Izuku managed to throw them. And throw them he did. Izuku managed to grab and throw the hero killer so aggressively that it looked like Bakugo had just taken over. "That must be the last of his energy, I have to make this count," Iida thought as he propelled himself upwards. Reciprocal burst. Iida screamed, flying up and giving a rib-shattering kick to the hero killer, who had been thrown across a building and shocked by green lightning. As he returned to the ground, he was caught by Izuku, and the two watched Todoroki burn the hero killer before catching him with ice. "I think it's..." Iida started, trailing off as Todoroki checked the hero killer. "Over?" Todoroki replied. The UA students tended to their wounds with some basic first aid, and using some rope from Native tied up the hero killer. Native insisted on dragging out the now unconscious villain, as the trio of UA students made their way out to the streets, where hopefully some other heroes were. Iida shed a final tear, before tightening his fists again. "I'll start again, this time, on the path of a true hero." Izuku was doing his best not to yawn as his hands twitched slightly. He, his friends and Native, made their way out to the street where it took all of his willpower to not just collapse and sleep, although he was thankful he did not have any headaches. As they made it out to the street, he was greeted by Hawks, who was followed by Endeavor and several of the latter's sidekicks. "They're your kid. You look like a right mess," Hawks exclaimed, before looking at Native, and to the currently knocked out hero killer, caught the big fish. "I suppose so, yeah," Izuku replied, taken aback by his mentor's still chill atmosphere. "All thanks to those three really, I just kinda sat there and needed to be protected." Native trailed off, cheeks reddening slightly. "Nonetheless, thank you three for saving my life, and preventing many more deaths." In response, Izuku mustered up enough energy to become a blushing and stuttering mess. Todoroki just nodded, and Iida remained lost in thought. He suddenly snapped out of it and began some spiel about how it was the UA's student duty to protect citizens and those in need. Izuku was hardly registering any of it, leaning slightly on Todoroki, who was more than happy to provide the support for who was probably his first and best friend, and doing his best to stay awake, when he heard a desperate warning from one of Endeavor's sidekicks. "Flying Nomu," he yelled, pointing at the bleeding creature which was swooping down at Izuku and Todoroki. Using the last of both his own and his quirk energy, he pushed Todoroki out of the way as he felt the sharp claws of the Nomu jab him in the stomach, quickly picking him up and beginning to fly away. He was hardly able to register anything from his drowsiness, but out of the corner of his eye he saw Hawks take off, and began to fly towards him. But before he could reach his maximum speed, Izuku watched Stain lick someone's cheek, and vaguely registered the feeling of falling when the hero killer grabbed him out of the creature's talons, and violently stabbed the creature in the brain. The action was more than enough to bring Izuku completely back into reality, completely waking him up as he realized what had just happened. He could faintly hear something about the hero killer now having a hostage and Hawks yelling at Endeavor not to fire as to not injure Izuku. "Endeavor," the hero killer rasped, turning towards the crowd of heroes, the worst of all the heroes. Stain began moving towards them, each step he took with more weight than the others, terrifying every last hero to their core. "Just proving my point, willing to kill a true hero for the sake of finishing me off," Stain said, a powerful bloodlust emanating from him. He held up two fingers and continued, "Of all the heroes in the world I have met or know of, there are only two true heroes. All Might," and he pointed another finger towards Izuku before continuing, "and this kid. And of all the heroes in the world, there is one I want to rid the world of most," Stain said, this time directing a glare directly at Endeavor. "You." At this point, the bloodlust emanating from Stain was so high, Izuku wouldn't be surprised if those back in Musatafu could feel it. And as soon as it happened, it finished. The hero killer stood still, eyes white as heroes in training were frozen in shock alike. Izuku vaguely felt himself being picked up by Hawks, who whispered, "You can rest easy now, kid. You did good, we'll deal with all the legal mumbo-jumbo later." Izuku mumbled a thanks, and Hawks gave Izuku a proud glance, as the UA student felt himself nodding off, his drowsiness quickly catching up again. Izuku woke up with a groan. He was still really tired, and as the events of last night came back to him, he could feel the soreness coming back, and he was completely out of energy. He didn't really feel any pain from his wounds, but when he rolled over it aggravated his shoulder. As a result, he shot up, and properly looked around the room. It was barely light out, and he was the first awake. In the room with him, there was Todoroki and Iida, both still sleeping, and each hooked up to hair trade monitors, much like himself. To his side there was a bedside table, on which there was a small backpack. On it there was a note directed to him, from Hawks. "Hey kid, hope you're feeling alright. Here's some of your stuff so you aren't completely bored out of your mind. Being stuck in recovery is the most boring part of being a hero. I'll probably talk to you sometime today about your actions, when the police talk to you as well. But I'm proud of you kid, you did well." Izuku started tearing up as he opened the bag. Within had several notebooks and a couple pens. He smiled, just what he needed to kill time. Opening up one of the notebooks, incidentally, it was Battle and Combat Strategy Book number 7, he began noting down the encounter with Stain, and started writing about the various techniques displayed by both himself and his opponent. After a few hours, Todoroki and Iida had both woken up, and the three students engaged in light conversation, despite the tense atmosphere they were in as they waited for word from the chief of police. Taking advantage of a break in conversation, Izuku began looking through the rest of the contents of the bag, and he saw a decent-looking phone, with another note from Hawks. "So, your phone was kinda completely smashed up, so I got you a replacement. You might wanna contact your friends before they have a panic attack." Izuku chuckled slightly, loading up the phone to find all the data was thankfully backed up somewhere, and he sent out a few messages, promising to call some people later on, and turning off the new phone just before Manuel, Hawks and someone who had a dog mutation quirk walked in. Izuku smiled nervously as he waved to Hawks, who walked up to his intern and patted his head. "You did good kid, and you stayed within my rules, chill a little bit," Hawks told him, and Izuku's smile became more sincere. On the other hand, Manuel walked over to Iida and whacked the student on the head. "What the hell were you thinking? Going out and hunting the hero killer on your own, whilst there was a crisis happening in this city no less?" Manuel scolded, resulting in Iida bowing deeply. He was about to start talking, when the other person introduced themselves. "Now that is out of the way, I am here to speak to you about your actions that night, Woof." The person said, "I am the Hosu Chief of Police, and as you know, using quirks without explicit permission to result in grievous bodily harm is illegal, Woof." The hero killer was found with severe burns, nerve damage, and several broken ribs amongst other things, Woof. As such. Hold on there. Todoroki cut the chief off, anger glistening in his eyes. "Are you saying we should have done nothing? If Izuku hadn't shown up, then Iida and Native would be dead, and if I didn't come they would all be gravely wounded. What are they teaching you at that school of yours, Woof?" The chief said, shaking his head. "Of course, that is the official opinion of the police. This is more than a little underhanded, but because there was only one other person at the incident at the time, and the pros you approached afterwards can be trusted to keep their mouths shut, we can simply not release full details to the public. We will tell them that some UA interns in Endeavor came across, and defeated the hero killer, as such not specifically revealing you. Whilst you would not receive direct merit, you would not be punished for your actions. On the other hand, we can release full details, and as such would be required to prosecute you for your actions. However, we do not want to hinder such young and promising heroes as yourself." The trio of students nodded, with Todoroki giving an annoyed grunt, before Hawk spoke up. "Hold on there, pal. I had given explicit instructions for my intern to use his quirk, as such he should at the very least be credited for his role in the capture directly," Hawk said, a fierce spark in his eyes. Izuku was slightly dumbfounded and became a blushing mess, wanting to speak up, but the chief beat him to it. "Very well, considering the circumstances we can say that Midori Raiko, one of your interns, played a major role in taking down Stain whilst not being specific." Hawks nodded happily, whilst Izuku was in a bit of shock. Despite this he thanked both of them profusely. "Due to the incident that occurred, chances are none of you will be able to return to your internships. However, I believe you all have gathered more than enough experience from this one scenario," the chief said, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "And from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of both the Hosu police force and citizens, I thank you for your actions that resulted in a vicious tyrant being taken off the streets, saving many in the future. So thank you, heroes." He finished, bowing deeply. Todoroki grunted in response. Iida thanked him for their forgiveness, and Izuku smiled nervously. Hawks was looking on proudly as he waved goodbye, off to check on Tokoyami's continued training. Luckily for him, due to his treatment of the situation, he would not be punished, or have his ability to take on interns revoked. This was not the same for Manuel, who had Iida run off whilst he was meant to be under his care. Iida apologized profusely and bowed a perfect 90 degrees, which was incredibly impressive all things considered, and Endeavor, who was noticeably not present, was let off because it's Endeavor. Much to Todoroki's dismay. Regardless, the adults left the students be as each of them continued with activities. Iida was talking to family over the phone, and Todoroki was doing some study of what appeared to be the chemical structure of water and ice, presumably to try and develop his quirk. Wait, if Todoroki produces ice and fire, could he theoretically then combine them and produce steam? What would his temperature ranges be? Probably at the absolute lowest it would be 0 Kelvin, minus 273.15 degrees Celsius or minus 459.67 degrees Fahrenheit, and considering Endeavor can comfortably melt cement, it would probably be something above 1550 degrees Celsius or 2822 degrees Fahrenheit, but could he make his fire cold and ice hot? Izuku muttered, writing frantically in a page for Todoroki. The boy with bi-colored hair blinked, and wrote a couple sticky notes of that information, before chuckling lightly to himself. Never change, Izuku, never change. After a while, Izuku finished his spiel about Todoroki's quirk in a page of the book, before quietly excusing himself to talk to his friends and family on the new phone. Stepping into a designated room, he found it empty and started by dialing Bakugo. It rang once, twice, thrice before an exhausted voice picked up. Zuku? Bakugo questioned. Izuku smiled, before answering. Yakak-chan, sorry I couldn't respond earlier, were being scolded. I don't give a shit about that. Are you okay, you damn nerd? Bakugo responded, his previous tiredness gone. Yeah, I'm fine, guy could barely land a hit on me. Izuku chuckled, as he heard some yelling in the background. What the fuck do you want? You're just a shitty extra, you don't get to tell me shit. Yeah, tell him I'll be out in a few minutes for fuck's sake. Sorry Zuku, I gotta go to do some dumb shit. I expect a full story and every detail once we get back home, got it. Alright Kak-chan, talk to you then. Izuku responded, before hanging up, but not before hearing more indiscriminate screaming, and more than a few choice words from Bakugo. Next on his list to call was his adoptive parents, who were both understandably worried but indescribably proud of their adoptive son, for playing a crucial role in the capturing of such a vicious murder, and the person to end dozens of pros' lives and careers. After bidding them farewell, he checked the next on his list. Members of the Big Three, who had all eventually become good friends with him, even the ever-shy Tamaki had started to open up a little. First up Tamaki, mostly because the boy's anxieties were probably not helped by the news that several UA student interns, one of whom confirmed to be Izuku, had taken down the one and only hero killer, Stain. The phone rang 5 times before a shaky voice picked up. Izuku. Yo Tamaki, just calling to let you know I'm okay. Izuku replied, smiling. Oh, thank goodness you're okay. Are you injured? Tamaki replied mildly confidently, at least relatively, like he was still whispering, but there was noticeably less stuttering. Not badly, just a couple scratches here and there, but overall I'll be okay. Izuku responded. Well, try to keep out of trouble. I look forward to hearing about it once this is all over. Talk to you later Izuku, Fat Gum is calling me for lunch. Tamaki replied, before hanging up. The next person to call was Mirio, who picked up after 2 rings. Yo. Izuku. Good to hear from you. How are you doing? I'm doing fairly well all things considered, yourself. Not bad, just doing the internships like you. Except getting into notably less trouble. Doing it with Night-Eye. As an All Might's only sidekick, or at least briefly, until they had a falling out. Yes, that Night-Eye. Mirio responded, mildly amused. Wah. Yes sir. Sorry Izuku, I gotta go back to training, talk to you later kiddo. The phone hung up shortly after. Who was that Mirio? Night-Eye asked, curious as to who Mirio's few friends were. It was lonely at the top after all. Izuku, hero name. Midori Reiko. He's a good friend. Mirio responded enthusiastically. One of the interns who was part of the defeat of the hero killer. Indeed, sir. I believe you'd like him. He has a decent attitude but a great mind. Mirio told him. Night-Eye just nodded slowly in response, perhaps. Perhaps. Izuku gulped loudly. Of all the people he needed to call, he was most nervous to call Nejire, for a number of reasons. Regardless, he pressed the contact and put the phone to his ear. Not even half a ring later, an excited yell came through. Izuku, oh my gosh, are you okay? Are you hurt? Are you resting? Why? Yes, it's me, Izuku. I'm okay now, I've only got a few cuts but no permanent damage. Just a few scars, but nothing bad. And yes, I'm resting. Izuku replied. Scars? Ooh, that's neat, where? Oh, does it still hurt? Hey, what was Stain's quirk? No, I'm not bothering anyone Ryuko. Sorry, Ryuko doesn't like it when I question people a bunch. Anyway, spill all the deets. Nejire replied. Just a scar on my cheek, and a scar on my arm. It doesn't hurt anymore. Stain's quirk was paralyzation via blood ingestion. It's why he fought with so many blades. It was really fascinating actually. He fought focused almost entirely on speed, and Izuku was cut off from his muttering when there was a yell heard from the other end. Are you talking to boyfriend Nejire? What? No, it's not like that. Sure. Ryuko, presumably, and Nejire bickered. Izuku was a shade of deep red. Despite that, he had to admit it was funny to hear Nejire stammer for once. I'll tell you once we get back to school. Everyone else wants to know anyway. Talk to you later, Nejire. Right? Talk to you later, Izuku. Just before the two hung up, Izuku could hear Ryuko teasing Nejire about being on first-name basis, and he felt his blush go deeper somehow. Yeah, he told them about the fight against Stain. If he could survive the attention until then. Izuku yawned and rolled over. At least he was no longer in pain. The worst part was the boredom. The boredom. All his friends were busy with their own internships. Iida and Todoroki were both already released and picked up by their respective parents. Although he did get to talk to Ingenium briefly as they came to thank the boys for stopping the person who put an end to his hero career, to which Izuku spent a lot of time stuttering, before managing to vaguely say something resembling a sentence. The most amusing thing was Todoroki's leaving statement. Flashback. Todoroki had gathered his belongings, but just before he left he pulled out a notebook. On it, there was a large label. It read Theories. Todoroki flipped to a particular page, and Izuku could just make out his name at the top. He chuckled when Todoroki asked the first question, are you biologically, distantly or otherwise, related to either Kaminari or Nezu? Well, no. I understand Kaminari, but Nezu. Izuku responded, stifling more laughter. So this is his notebook for conspiracy theories like my own for quirks. Well, similar to him, you have a tendency to go off on unintelligible tangents, and additionally you seem to possess an ability to materialize notebooks, whilst Nezu can materialize tea. By this point, Izuku was holding his sides in laughter as the stoic-faced Todoroki did not once crack a smile, whilst reading off the notes. Hahaha. Okay, first off, I am not related to Nezu, and second I carry a variety of notebooks depending on the event. The school jackets have several inside pockets that I tend to utilize for that. Izuku replied, clutching the other boy's shoulder to stabilize himself. Todoroki thought back to the events, and that was true. Izuku tended to wear jackets, whilst not in active combat, such as the sports festival. After he had recovered, the boy was wearing a jacket despite the weather not being all too cold. Perhaps it was something to do with his quirk as well. Regardless, Todoroki apologized before bidding farewell. Then flashback. Izuku chuckled fondly at the memory whilst he reached in for another notebook, until his phone buzzed. Picking it up, he heard the voice of his parents telling him to pack his things, get changed and come down to the lobby as he had been officially discharged, and they had come to pick him up. Once he got down, he was hugged tightly by both of his parents, giving them a soft smile, and hugging them back, before following them out to the car. After a brief scolding for getting in trouble already courtesy of his mother, he fell asleep leaning on the window, and when he woke up they had just arrived home with the sun setting in the background. Izuku was told there would be a dorm system being introduced in school after several problematic happenings, and so he would need to pack his clothes, books, and dismantle any furniture as the school would be moving the items during the first day after internships for students to return to after school. Making his way to his room, he put on some headphones and listened to a variety of podcasts and music to ignore the deafening silence of the household. Eventually he had packed up everything in boxes, bar a few casual outfits and his school uniform for the first day of the dorms, and several notebooks and a couple books for his entertainment in the meantime. Whilst he was technically recovered, the doctors were insistent on resting until school started up again, as to allow his body to grow and develop from the experience, so he had to focus on improving his thought process. So he spent some time reading various works regarding the shogunate period of ancient Japan. Due to the militaristic nature of the time period, there was plenty of military history to study and understand. Whilst very few villains were organized enough to establish a large group and fewer still be smart enough to maneuver in such a way, it was definitely useful to know when up against his fellow classmates. That and it meant he would be ahead of the classwork. A few days passed and Izuku had to return to school seeing his classmates again. Pulling up the hood of the school jacket, his was custom to help suppress the lightning arsing from him. Much like his hero costume, he managed to make it to school without being recognized. The moment he made it through the UA gate, however, a blur of blue crashed into him. Almost immediately he recognized it, and his cheeks became a deep shade of red. Nejire, what are you doing? Izuku eventually managed to stutter out. She didn't respond immediately, and Izuku looked up to see Tamaki, Mirio and Bakugo laughing at the green-haired boy's current position. Nejire. I was so worried when I heard that you fought the hero killer. She told him, before releasing him and standing upright, barely taller than the other boy, and I'm glad you contacted me, but I don't trust you to admit the full extent of your injuries. Izuku chuckled nervously, the blush ever present as he rubbed the back of his head. I didn't lie or hold anything back. I'll tell you guys the details after class, for now we should get going. Izuku said, causing Nejire to dramatically gasp, before running off dragging a Tamaki who was evidently already tired of Nejire, and a Mirio who had a smile that seemed to never leave his face. Izuku blinked twice as his face returned to its normal coloration. Bakugo chuckled and clapped the boy with green hair on his back. Denser than a black hole, I swear. Come on, let's go. Bakugo told him. Izuku just nodded, mindlessly following Bakugo to the classroom until he realized something. Hey Kak-chan. Izuku started. What? Bakugo responded, turning to face his brother. What is wrong with your hair? Izuku said, clasping a hand over his mouth to suppress the laughter. Eschinas did some weird ass shit with it, and it won't fucking go back to normal. Bakugo responded, twitching more than a little. At this point Izuku couldn't stop himself from laughing, clutching his brother's shoulder to stabilize himself. The explosive boy was getting gradually more annoyed as they kept walking, reaching the class 1A. When the two opened the door, there weren't many members of the class present, only Sero, Kirishima, Mineta, Iida and Todoroki. Izuku approached the latter two, conversing quietly with them, having had become much closer after the events of the internship. Apparently nearly dying tended to do that. Bakugo understood, and was approached by Sero and Kirishima, who immediately began laughing at his haircut. It was swept to the side and gelled down to be flat. They had a similar reaction to Izuku, both bursting out into laughter. Izuku chuckled at their antics as he checked the schedule for today. A few normal lessons, but also spending a decent amount of time doing heroics, probably since everyone was back from internships, and an extra lesson of homegroup at the end of the day, probably to assist with moving into dorms. Regardless, the students funneled in, and eventually the events of the internship came up. Almost immediately, everybody turned to look at Izuku, who pulled his hood up again, and buried himself into a notebook, writing something down before ripping the page out, and quietly walking over to Mina, and giving it to her. She raised an eyebrow, but when he nodded to the page she understood. She's the most sociable and free-going, so she can read the story. I don't think Todoroki and Iida would want to, and Kocchan is Kocchan. Izuku had thought, with something similar written on the page at the top. Mina began reading out the page as Izuku nervously played with his fingers. He had made sure to not name the other two UA students as to be intentionally vague, whilst additionally making the experience much less exciting overall, and reduce his input in the event. And giving Endeavor what was effectively Todoroki's role in the fiasco. All in all, it was a semi-fabricated story that had a loose basis in reality, that would hopefully satisfy his classmates. And that it did. No one had any questions to ask, there were plenty of compliments thrown around, and both Iida and Todoroki seemed content with his retelling of the events. Mina skipped over and handed back the piece of paper to Izuku, who proceeded to pocket the piece of paper, so he could make sure he used the same retelling for the big three later on. He continued the morning until first lesson by simply writing in one of the notebooks. Once the day got going, the class made it to their heroics lesson in their uniforms. Izuku had now added some capture rope to the side, a unique metal that would react to his green lightning, allowing for him to mold it as he saw fit using the lightning, making it a capture tool akin to Aizawa-sensei's scarf. He was fiddling with the rope as he waited for the rest of the students to come out. Eventually everyone was waiting for All Might when he came in with a sign that read rescue. Sir? Does this mean we will be going to the USJ? Iida piped up. In response, All Might shook his head as he began explaining. There is more than one aspect to rescuing people. So today, he said, flipping the sign around as he continued, we will be doing a rescue race. First to save a civilian in the middle of the factory environment wins. We will race in groups of 5 to show off all those new skills from your internships. All Might proclaimed, as he began to lead the class in the direction. Izuku was in the first group, with Sero, Iida, Ojiro, and Mina. He could hear students predicting who would win, with the group being one with some of the most agile students. He heard Tokoyami chuckle as predictions landed between Sero and Iida, but the sentient host remained silent as those in the first group made their way to the starting location. The moment All Might said go, Iida began sprinting, Sero began swinging overhead with Ojiro whilst Mina just skated around. A few seconds in, Izuku could faintly hear students questioning him as he braced himself, allowing the green lightning of his quirk to fuse with him, with the new technique. There were a few gasps of awe as Izuku took off, propelled primarily by his quirk as he leaped high and quickly looked around for the civilian. When spotted, he landed on the ground and began sprinting towards the location with his eyes closed. He overtook Mina and Iida as he was able to take the sharp corners slightly better with such precise momentum control with his quirk, before passing Ojiro and Sero as they had to stop and check where they were going. With his quirk's ability to boost his senses, Izuku was easily capable of memorizing the course, however he found it much easier to do if he was able to visualize it, rather than rely on memory alone. Ducking under some piping at the last minute, he found himself at the target location as he released his quirk, a small flash of green lightning coming from him as he released the immediately available energy, so he didn't have to worry so much about managing it. His hair returned to its usual floppy state, and his eyes returned to the slightly darker green, whilst he waited for the remainder of his race group to make it. Once they did, they all congratulated Izuku, much to his dismay as he blushed, and Iida seemed a little disappointed in himself as he should be fastest, but nonetheless he congratulated Izuku, as the two made small talk, on the way back to the rest of the class. Upon arriving with the class, he was immediately surrounded by them, Bart Todoroki, Bakugo, Tokoyami and those in his race group, and there were a lot of questions, as he seemed to pull a brand new speed and quirk technique out of nowhere, making him much faster than before. He just, after his stuttering subsided, explained it was something that Hux taught him as part of the internship. Everyone looked at Tokoyami, who remained unemotive, to see what he would do before All Might gathered their attention, and did his best to try and break down what happened. So, what Izuku did was figure out the route and then rush there. So he planned first and executed. Tsu said, breaking into some convoluted explanation All Might was going through. Exactly, young Asi. Now, next group, young Tokoyami, young Asi, young Bakugo, young Todoroki and young Irozu. All Might announced as Bakugo smirked before All Might added something else whilst looking at Bakugo, and keep damage to a minimum. Bakugo twitched at All Might's last comment as he prepared himself to propel upwards and fly straight towards the objective. Icy Hot would probably make some massive ice structure, Frog Face would probably just bounce there, 3D printer would make rollerblades or some shit, and Bird Head would just run. Bakugo smirked, he had this in the bag. He might not be able to best Izuku's time, but he would get damn close. The moment All Might said go, everyone did as Bakugo predicted except for the Bird Head, who was talking to their sentient. Bakugo rolled his eyes as he flew upwards, looking for the target when a gust of wind blew him to the side. My apologies, Bakugo. Bird Head said, flying past the explosive blonde and maintaining a slightly unsteady altitude before swooping, presumably in the direction of the hostage. Wait, fly? What the fuck? Bakugo thought, before realizing that Bird Head had grown wings using the sentient bastard, presumably something he did with Hawks. Yeah, that makes sense. Shaking his head, Bakugo began propelling himself through the air towards the target, getting neck and neck with Bird Head before the bastard flapped his fucking wings another time, and took the lead by a fucking beak, and managed to land and get there first. Bakugo fought the urge to twitch as he landed in second, just ignoring the bastard in first as they waited in an awkward silence for the rest of the race group to show up. Surprisingly, the 3D printer showed up in third, with a bike and fucking X-ray goggles, to follow the heat signatures of those in first, with Icy Hot in fourth and Frog Bitch in last. Once all gathered, the group returned to the class who, unsurprisingly, mobbed Bird Head, all asking him what happened. He simply replied with, I have assimilated myself further with darkness. Much like the edgy fuck he was. Bakugo was twitching, but surprised when Izuku placed a hand on his shoulder. You're annoyed you haven't progressed as much as Tokoyami and myself, aren't you? Izuku asked. Yeah. Bakugo responded, slumping slightly as the scowl left his face momentarily, replaced with a look of disappointment. Izuku wrote something down in a notebook, before handing Bakugo a small piece of paper with a book title on it. It was something to do with explosion physics or some shit, and there were instructions for where to find it in Izuku's massive stockpile of books. Bakugo looked at his brother, who was beaming at the explosive blonde, and simply nodded with a slight smile. Just what I could use right now. Support and a way to improve. Eventually class finished and Izuku began heading to the changing rooms with the rest of the boys, as he peeled off the weird fabric that his hero costume was made out of. It wasn't the most comfortable, but it did its job well. He heard Mineta yelling something incredibly perverted, getting his, and all the other boys' attention, as he started peeling off a poster on the wall. They all understood, well, Izuku didn't, when there was a small hole in the wall. Izuku just blinked and tapped Todoroki's shoulder and whispered if Todoroki could explain to him. Todoroki's response was to chuckle and pat Izuku's head, saying, never change. Izuku blinked, but he understood once he heard Mineta yelling about various traits regarding the female members of the class. He was blushing hard and was about to pull Mineta away when Mineta screamed, an earphone jack in his eye before the hole filled with concrete. Mineta got a stern lecturing too from Iida, before trying to run away only to be caught by Bakugo, who was twitching with explosions coming from his hands. Izuku quietly walked past them as he heard a loud scream, and more than a few explosions, before Mineta landed in the ground in front of him, digging into the ground deep with more than a few burn marks. He sidestepped the pervert, before continuing on his way. All of his classmates did the same. Everyone returned to class, except Mineta, and the students were briefed by Aizawa-sensei. For his actions, Mineta would be under house arrest for several days, and have to manage cleaning the dorms along with the rubbish, and Bakugo was let off the hook, barely. No one really cared as Aizawa-sensei led them to the dorms, everyone varying degrees of excited to see their housing for the next few years. Their new homes. Izuku and the rest of Class 1 made their way to the new dorms, dubbed Heights Alliance. Once there they met Mineta, and Aizawa-sensei began a rundown of the dorms. Each room has a fridge, and a private bathroom. He started, leading them inside. Inside you'll find a key for your room. If you need another for whatever reason, you will incur charges relating to it, or you can try, and make one yourself, whatever, I don't care. Anyway, there is a communal kitchen and lounge area. You will also have access to the school gym and any other facilities. There is also a bathing area, that is separated by gender. Aizawa-sensei explained, finishing with a slight glare at Mineta, who gulped. Their hair settled as he led the students inside, and handed a slip of paper to Iida, and a slip of paper to Yoyorozu. Yoyorozu led the girls to their respective dorms as Iida did for the boys. Izuku and Bakugo were next to each other, which neither had any complaints for. Izuku got to work unpacking, and was delighted to see the school had followed through with his request of the rubberized walls, meaning he didn't have to worry about his quirk disturbing his dorm mates. Constructing his bookshelf, he started layer by layer, filling it out with his excessive amount of books, with notebooks entirely on the bottom shelf, and the rest a meticulously organized selection of fiction and non-fiction. He placed the futon adjacent to the desk, which was facing out the window in such a way there was still balcony access. Izuku stood at his doorway, satisfied with his work and admiring the tidiness of it all, before hanging up uniforms in the closet, and placing various toiletries in the bathroom. Fluffy hair doesn't fluffy itself. Finally he was finished, with a few hours to spare before everyone had agreed to meet in the lounge for dinner, so, with no work to do, he grabbed a book for Bakugo, and left it out prominently before grabbing some headphones and pulling out a notebook. Listening to various songs, he got lost in his little world as he flipped to the page regarding his own quirk. Using a laptop and a secondary monitor to do some research, his hands moved faster than the human eye could track, his eyes switching between the two monitors and notebook. Both his hands and eyes had streaks of lightning in them, and he didn't need to worry about anything breaking thanks to some of the school's rubberization equipment as his quirk began to spark slightly. The information was to do with the composition of lightning, and the way it could be harnessed in the natural world, irrespective of quirks. After a lot of research, delving into several rabbit holes at once, each with their own page, he was broken out of thoughts as there was a loud banging on the door. Izuku. Get your ass out here for dinner. Bakugo yelled through. HM? Oh yeah, I'll be out there in a moment. Izuku called back, not looking at the door or realizing his quirk was active on his mouth. Bakugo, having had tolerated it for years, rolled his eyes and called something back. Bring your fucking notebook with you. At this, Izuku broke out of his flow and took off his headphones, holding onto a couple of different colored pens as he pocketed the notebook and book for Bakugo, and met Bakugo outside his dorm room with a sheepish smile. Bakugo took the book, and just rolled his eyes again, and began walking off, yelling hurry the fuck up, as he went. Izuku caught up and walked in a comfortable silence with his brother as they made their way downstairs for dinner with the rest of the class. With the class, Izuku made small talk with various members of the class after Yoyorozu had ordered in food. According to the rules, it would be brought to the gate where the student responsible for ordering would be to collect it along with friends, and if no one picked it up the teachers would take it for themselves. Who were they to turn down free food? Regardless, Yoyorozu and Iida had excused themselves to go collect the food from the gate, as the remaining students were divided amongst their various social groups. Izuku was writing in his notebook whilst conversing with Todoroki, the two discussing management of their unruly ranged attacks. Personally with my fire, I compress and compact the fire to be able to fire it in a stream. Todoroki explained. Izuku nodded as he wrote that down, adding a selection of numbers and a variety of diagrams as he went. With the lightning, establishing a connection through the ground is easiest, or a direct link between the target and myself as the lightning tends to be incredibly unruly. But perhaps if I can compact it, I might be able to shoot something like a beam, or fire it in bursts. Could you help me with that? Izuku responded, closing his notebook as he looked to Todoroki. Todoroki nodded, and Izuku beamed in happiness. Todoroki just chuckled as he watched the green-haired boy write furiously in the book, and turned his gaze towards the door, anticipating faintly glistened in his heterochromatic eyes. Finally, the students in question returned, each carrying several bags of food delivered. The other students quickly gathered around the dining tables, as Kaminari helped Kirishima to set the tables. Once everyone was seated, the students engaged in light and intermittent conversation, as they all ate in peaceful contentment. Once they were done, everyone left the dining room to a tearful Mineta to clean up as they made it to the lounge room to hang out. A content silence filled the room before it was broken by none other than Mina. Yo. You know what we should do. Mina called out, attracting everyone's attention. Iida, surprisingly, was the first to respond, a group study section. We ought to take this additional time together to accelerate our... Heavens no. We're going to do a dorm showcase to show off our new rooms. Consider it a chance to make a better connection with other members of the class. Mina cut him off. An excellent idea. Iida nodded, before Mina began going towards the first room of the boys, Aoyama's. Everyone entered, and was not too surprised. It was bright. Blindingly so. Everyone quickly moved on as they were bored, and to avoid the dangerously bright lights. Doesn't it just spark? Aoyama started. Didn't expect anything less. Mina said, cutting Aoyama off and leading everyone to the next room, deflating the sparkling boy. The next room, Tokoyami's, was the polar opposite, moody, dark and edgy. Ooh, spooky. Mina exclaimed, doing some weird jazz hands as she said that, before everyone left and looked down the hall to where the next room was. Down the hall, they saw Mineta, gesturing for people to come in. Everyone promptly turned around and headed to the stairs to the next floor. First room to visit on this floor was Ojiro's, which was aggressively normal, much to his embarrassment. Next was Kaminari's room, which was funky, if more than a little tacky to everyone else. Last on the third floor was Kota's room, which everyone found adorable, mostly because there was a bunny. Even Bakugo took a turn holding the rabbit, much to his displeasure and everyone else's excitement. Izuku made sure to take a photo, for memory's sake. Next, fourth floor, the first room was Shoji's minimalist room, which had almost nothing, much to everyone's dismay. Sero's room was very oriental, including the rug, curtain, even the lighting in the room, had been adjusted to fit the mood of the room. Afterwards was Kirishima's self-proclaimed manly room, which had a punching bag and a few inspirational posters. Last on the floor was Sato's room, who remembered he had began baking a cake, and managed to bring it out of the oven just in time, and proceeded to offer some to everyone. All the girls had some, along with a few of the boys, all of them proclaiming how good it was. Moving to the final floor, the first room to look at was Iida's, proclaiming that it was a model of what, as a UA student, a room should look like. In short, there was next to nothing interesting to look at. Afterwards was Todoroki's room, who had completely redone the floor, to create a more traditional style room, much to everyone's surprise. When asked how he did it, he simply replied hard work. There were 2 more rooms to look at. Bakugo's and Izuku's. Most students were sweating slightly at the idea of visiting the former's room. He would normally snap from people just looking at him, they weren't sure they would survive looking in Bakugo's room. Until Izuku tapped Bakugo on the shoulder and whispered something in the boy's ear. Bakugo sighed, and opened the door to his room for them. Fucking nerd says I need to give you at least a minute. If any of you are in there for any longer, I will fucking murder you. And if you take a single fucking photo I will shatter your phone like a twig, before I shatter you. And I might murder Grapist regardless. Bakugo finished, glaring at the student in question who had just tried to perv on some of the girls. Sue slapped the Grapist, before going to take a look inside Bakugo's room like everyone else. To one side, there were several variations of punching bags, much to Kirishima's happiness, exclaiming how manly it was, along with a bar for bodyweight exercises. Kirishima was begging Bakugo to use some of the items, he snapped back with, use the school's shitty hair. To the other side were a few posters of various heroes, a few horror movie posters and a small bookshelf of various study materials. Facing the balcony window was his desk, which had some general quirk information and a few notebooks opened, with a mix of battle tactics, and notes from the school day. No wonder you got 4th for the midterms. Man, just looking at all this makes my brain hurt. Kaminari complained, his brain almost frying merely from looking. Mina nodded alongside him, before going to look over at the posters. Hey. Alien. Nice. Mina called out, as Bakugo began twitching. Izuku chuckled, before tapping on Bakugo's shoulder and motioning to the clock. Bakugo grinned, before screaming. Alright everyone, get the fuck out now. Needless to say, the members of Class 1 complied. The final of the boys' rooms to look at was Izuku, who was currently shaking as he played with the sleeve of his jacket, giving a nervous smile to the rest of the class as he gripped the door handle, opening it to show them his room. No one really knew what to expect from the shy, reserved but friendly boy. But this was decidedly not it. It was like walking into a library, a ceiling-high bookshelf completely packed with books and notebooks. The walls had a little give to them, a rubbery texture. There was a desk looking to the window, with several notebooks open across it with a small bucket of different colored pens. The desk had a skull laptop and an external monitor, both with several different articles, with more tabs of more articles in each window. At the side of the room there was a mattress flipped up, but when flipped down the class, could see the special mattress protector, but a lack of blankets and pillows, which was a tad concerning to several of his friends. Whilst some people were admiring his collection of books, several people were looking at the notes on his screen. They were left speechless, and Kaminari noticed this. Yo, it can't be that bad, can it? Dude, if you thought Bakugo's was intense, then I don't even know what to describe this as. Sero told him, pinching his nose bridge. Kaminari and Mina decided to look, watching some of their friends and classmates walking away from the desk shell-shocked. Neither of them managed to read past of the first sentence from some of his notes. Due to the polarization of the atoms, and the increased rotation of the electrons from green lightning, it is reasonable to assume that with the correct usage, the green lightning could be manipulated in such a way as to take advantage of the polarization of atoms that collectively make up other attacks, as to repel them via a combination of slight magnetization and disrupting the bonds of the atoms to dispel the attack further. The sentence read. Seeing the swirling eyes of both Kaminari and Mina, who were carried out by a laughing Jiro and Higakure respectively, Izuku chuckled nervously before Iida walked robotically over to the notes and quickly turned away. I applaud you for your thoroughness and detail with your notes and ideas, Izuku, a shining model of what a UA student should strive towards. Iida proclaimed, quickly leaving the room and joining the rest of the class. Everyone had several questions, a lot of them being, can you explain that in normal language? But they all brushed it off as the boy with a faint red tint on his cheeks came out to join the rest of the class. Altogether, they headed towards the main lounge room before Mineta spoke up. We got to see the boys' rooms, but shouldn't we all see the girls as well? Now, if anyone but Mineta and maybe Kaminari, there would have been no qualms. But lo and behold, the little grapist had to be the one to mention it. After all, if you were allowed to take shots at our rooms, we should be able to do the same. Mineta continued, looking pointedly at several of the boys, some of whom were nodding in quiet agreement, irrespective of his own intent. Mina looked over to the rest of the girls, who all shrugged in compliance, except Jiro, who was a little flustered, and began walking to the other side of the dorms whilst talking over her shoulder. Sure, but you are on very thin ice, and I think most people would agree with me on that, she said, pointing towards Shoji, Sero, and Bakugo, who was sparking small explosions from his palms, while sending a murderous glare towards Mineta. Mineta audibly gulped and nodded, before following with the rest of the class. The first room they looked at was Uraraka's, who explained that she was living on a low budget, so her room was fairly minimal, with very few luxuries. Several students nodded in understanding, and Sue extended an offer to share various luxuries with her, to which Uraraka nodded furiously. After the small exchange, everyone left and followed Sue into her own room, right next door. Sue's room was painted a light green, and on the walls, had paintings of the sun and the ocean. When you have small siblings, you learn to do simple crafts to keep them happy, and it was quite satisfying for myself too, Ribbit, Sue told everyone. Mineta was about to say something, starting with your siblings, and proceeded to get hit very hard by Sue's tongue, and Sero placed a piece of tape over his mouth. The grape-headed, and probably brained, boy was a little downcast as they went upstairs toward the next room, Mina's. Mina was almost bouncing as she opened the door to her room. Izuku was greeted by a room that was hot pink. That was about it. If he were being honest, he wasn't really sure what to expect, but this was fairly on point. The next room was Higakure's. His room was a stereotypical girl's room from the pre-quirk era, pink and filled with hearts. Mineta, unable to control his impulses, ran towards the drawers and began sniffing. Shoji caught the boy quickly, dragging him back before handing Mineta to Bakugo, who just lightly toasted the boy, before Sero completed the job by wrapping him up in a cocoon of tape, like a spider wrapping its prey. They handed the end of the tape to Bakugo, who was put in charge of dragging the boy along. Mineta was just put on a very bumpy roller coaster, probably not the first stage of hell he would face. After that short fiasco, the second to last room to look at was Jiro's, who was holding her earphone jacks with a light blush as she opened the door to her room. Just please don't laugh, she told everyone, leading the class in. The moment they got in, they saw a room fit for a rock star. Dozens of instruments and band posters hung up all over the place. It suits you, Izuku said, trying to reassure the nervous girl. Explain. Now, she replied, eyes narrowed and earphone jacks primed. Izuku waved his hands in fear before continuing, well, you're like a rock star, with your quirk and knowledge in music, and this looks like a room that would belong to a rock star. Jiro blinked once, before nodding and thanking Izuku, who released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The final room was Yaoyorozu's. His room was completely cramped. She explained that she expected the room to be much larger, and her furniture from her own room didn't fit. Well, she's rich and honest, Izuku thought whilst looking around. However, he heard something very interesting before they left the room. Oi, 3D printer. Bakugo yelled. If you need help doing some demolition, he continued, making a tiny explosion, to further prove his point, I'd be happy to tear some shit apart. Yaoyorozu nodded with a bubbly smile, thanking him for the offer, as they all made their way downstairs to be rushed back to their own dorms by Iida, as he realized the time, stressing that UA's students must be awake and fully aware for all lessons. Izuku flipped down his mattress, closing off his school laptop, and making sure everything was packed for the next day, before collapsing onto his bed, finding a weird comfort in the lack of pillow and blanket. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.